Hi there. Today I'm going to show you the basics of using Fusion in DaVinci 17.2. Let's get started. Welcome back. My name is Dave and this is Fuzzee Tutorials. So right now I've got DaVinci set to 16 by 9, so 1080p basically, or 1440p. But I'm going to be actually shooting the rest of this in widescreen. I just wanted to show you what you'll probably be seeing when you first fire up DaVinci and start a new project. So now we're going to expand to full ultra wide. Okay, so we're in the edit tab, and so we're going to go up here and we're going to right click and we're going to create a new Fusion composition, and we'll just leave it as default. And just one other thing, although in the intro I mentioned that it's 17.2, but there's actually just been an upgrade, I think yesterday. Well, yesterday was when I installed it, so I'm actually running 17.3. There's not a lot of differences as far as functionality. One difference to note is when you get effects library packages, you no longer have to drag them into Fusion to install them. You can just double click them right off your whatever file manager app you're using, and it'll install them automatically for you, so save you some steps. All right, so we're going to take our Fusion composition and we're going to drag it to our timeline, and I'm going to hit Shift Z on the keyboard to zoom in, and we're just going to make sure our playhead's over top of it somewhere, and we'll go into Fusion. All right, so we're just going to take our media out, and what media out is whatever you create in Fusion is going to wind up going to media out, and that's what pumps it back into your timeline. So in DaVinci Resolve, Fusion is node-based rather than layer-based. It might be a little different for you if you're coming from another package that uses layers, but once you learn the power of a node-based setup, you'll really begin to appreciate how much more flexible it is. So it's pretty easy to understand. Let's just imagine that this area down here that we're working in is almost like a tunnel on the highway or a train tunnel. So your media out is kind of your front of the train, and you're going to start building stuff at the back of the train, and you're going to work your way towards the front of the train. So the first thing that we need to do to get started is we need to drag in a background node. So we're just going to drag this in, and now your background will normally automatically set to the size of your project. So if you're doing like 1080p or 4K, it's going to automatically size to that. Now if you don't go in and customize it to a specific size, it'll automatically resize itself based on what project you're dropping it into. So typically you just want to leave that alone, kind of use it as default. And then we're going to use our left mouse button here, and we're going to drag it over and connect it to our media out. And you'll see there's a little white dot here, and there's two little spots where you can have dots. And the right dot will display it up here, and if you activate the left one, it'll display it over here. And you can have one displaying in both sides at the same time, although that's not typically how you use it. And before we get putting a bunch of stuff in here, I just want to grab another node real quick, drag it in. This is a text node. We'll use this in this little demonstration. So if I was to drag from my output and drag it down to my output here and let go, it's going to automatically drop in what's called a merge. Now a merge node is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It lets you merge one thing into another. So if I was to take this and kind of pull this off to the side and down here, see how these are all kind of just kind of all over the place at weird angles going directly. And if you like to work that way, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, when you got large projects and a lot of nodes, you're probably going to want to organize things a little better just to keep stuff sorted easier. So a couple things you've got that you can help to keep things organized is if you right click here and we go to Arrange Tools, and we'll set it to Grid, and then we're going to right click again, and this time we're going to go to Options, and I'm going to change to Orthogonal Pipes. And now everything is going to be nice and squared off, and because we're going to snap to the grid, we can make sure that everything is going to be nice and straight and in line. Just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so now first we talked about working in a tunnel from the left to the right, and within that structure you can stack things. Just like you see here, the text is stacked on top of the merge, and you can stack stuff in between. So you could add in some other nodes that will modify the text that's going into the merge. And that's basically the simple structure of how nodes work. And it's what makes it a lot more flexible than working in layers. Okay, so now that we've got our text node selected, we can come up here and actually drop some text in. So we can go here and we can make some simple changes. Now this is called the inspector that we're working in here. And if it isn't already open, if you're like this, you can just come up here and click on inspector and it'll pop that open. Now if you're working with not a lot of screen real estate and you want more room down here to work with, you got a little button up here that you can click and you can shrink it. So then it keeps it up in this area here and gives you more space to work down here. Now I'm just going to leave it open like that, fully expanded, because I've got lots of screen real estate to work with. And for the purposes of a tutorial, it makes it easier to show you things if we're not having to scroll this up and down all the time. Now we can come in here and we can set the font. So one of the fonts that I use quite a lot is Cooper. And you can adjust your size here. You can adjust the color. Now if you leave your background here at default and we go back into our Edit tab, you'll see that it's on a black screen. Now if we were to put something under it, let's take our Fusion composition and move it up to another layer, and let's put something underneath it. So let's just grab our generators and let's grab a 4-color gradient, drop that underneath. But now you can see it's still on a black background because we didn't change the characteristics of that background node in Fusion. So if we go back into Fusion, select our background node, and we'll come up here and we'll take our alpha and we can drop it to 0. And now this little checkerboard pattern in the background means that everything here that you see the checkerboard on is transparent. So if we go back to our Edit tab, you'll see we've now got our 4-color gradient there. All right, so we'll go back into Fusion. And now you don't have to do that. You could actually have it come up with a dark background, and sometimes that's what you want. So if you do that, you do have your full option for colors. And if you click on that little arrow thing there, you can pop this down so you don't have to have that that little pop-up screen show up. And then you can pick a color in here like so. And you can set your type of color. So you could go from a solid color to a gradient. And sometimes that's useful for other things as well. But we're just going to go back to solid color. And we're going to go back to black, and we're going to make it transparent. Because most of the times when you're doing text, you're going to be dropping it on top of existing footage of some kind. So that's going to be the most typical use for it. So let's just grab these and we'll move them in a little tighter here. And we'll just tidy things up a little bit. So when you're working with nodes, as I already showed you with the text, if you pull in a new node and you drag it to an output of something else, it'll usually drop a merge in. But if you need to bring a merge in manually, you've got a little icon right here. You can bring a merge in like that. And the little green tab up here is your foreground. And this connects to the background. And this is a mask. And this is your output, the little square one. Okay, so let's look at another tab here. Let's grab our. Actually, let's instead of just working with a bunch of text nodes, let's bring in something real quick and just open up a power bin. And let's see if I've got a. Here we go. Let's just grab a little graphic. So it's going to show up as a media in. Now that can be just a still shot like that is, or it could be a chunk of video. It could even be audio if you want. Now it used to be in older versions of Fusion you couldn't work with audio in Fusion, but as of I believe 17.2 you can. It might be an earlier version of 17 that you can, but I know for sure you could in 17.2. So now we're just going to rename this. So if we just select it and hit F2. Oops, sorry, wrong key. F2, then we can give it a name. So we'll just call this logo. So now if I drag this down to my output here, it'll automatically pop it into a merge. And then we can take that image, and if we want to, we can display it on our left-hand screen. So we hit that little dot there, or you can hit 1 on the keyboard. So let's just turn that off again. So if we hit 1, that'll make it show up. Hit 1 again to turn it off. You can also take your node and drag it up to the window, and that'll accomplish the same thing. So 3 different ways to do it, and you just use whatever way you're comfortable with. Okay, so if you want to change the position or size of that on a merge node, you've got positioning and sizing capabilities here. Now it only works with whatever is attached to the foreground. So if I make changes here, then it's going to move it. Now, but if I have something on the background, it's not going to do anything with that. So, and we can move it around. We could flip it. And we could set our blend so we can make it translucent if we want. We can adjust the angle. And so you can do all this. Now, if you've got multiple things that you're working with that are winding up going into a single merge, if you adjust it at this level, everything is going to get adjusted at once for sizing. So if you want to size something individually by itself that separates it from the merge, or you want to have more options as to what you can do with it, I mean, we can actually change the size of it in here as well. Oh, sorry, I got the wrong thing selected. Oh, let's select the rate node. That might work a little better. Okay, so we'll select our merge again, and we can adjust the size here as well if we wanted to. But another way you could do all this is, let's set this all back to default. So I'm just double clicking the labels for these things and it'll set them back to what their default was. So we can actually click this little line here where it turns blue to disconnect it. And we can come up here and we can get a transform node. And we can pull that in there. And then we can attach this to the little orange triangle and then attach this output to the merge. Okay, and then we can do all of our changes in transform. Now it doesn't really look like it does anything more than the merge, but if you go into settings, you've got a few more things that you can add. If you're going to be doing some animation and moving it around, you could hit motion blur. Now I don't want to get too deep into the finer points here in this beginner introduction, but I will show you how you can do some quick and easy animation with stuff. So if we wanted to, say, animate this little logo, how it comes in, there's a couple of things that we can do. Let's say we want it to come in from a smaller size, but we want it to wind up in a specific spot. So let's find where we want our logo here. So maybe we want it right there to the left of our text. Okay, so we need to approach this almost backwards. We're going to start from the position and size that we want it to wind up. So let's say we want it to take say a second to get there. So to do that, we're going to move our position, our keyframe. We're going to move to frame 30. So we're at 30 frames per second, so that's 1 second in. And the sharp among you might notice that actually we're going to be 1 frame over a second because it's starting at frame 0. But that's fine for the purposes of what we're doing here. It's just easier to do stuff in your head if we just work with even numbers. So we're going to go over here to where it says size, and we're going to click this little diamond, which creates a keyframe. So we'll click that little diamond, and then we'll take our frame and move it back down to 0. And we don't have to hit our keyframe again. As soon as we make a change to the size, it'll automatically add a new keyframe. So we can take our size and drop it down to 0. And see how it turned that red? So now, if we hit our space bar to play it, see, over a period of a second, it comes in. So let's just back it up again, play that again. Now you see how that's just, it's very linear, it's really smooth. It increases in size exactly the same. It may not be exactly what you want. You might want it to look a little more organic. So to do that, let's go back down kind of somewhere in the middle here. We'll go up here and we'll open up what's called our Spline Editor. So we'll hit Spline. And then we're going to click on our transform to turn these on. And the only things that are going to show up in here are anything where you've activated keyframes. So this transform one is the only thing that we've got keyframes on, so that's the only thing that shows up. So if we've got a checkbox, that means we can actually edit these. But if it doesn't have a checkbox, if it's got a little square, it means you can see it, but you can't edit it. Or you can turn it right off so it becomes invisible. So this comes in handy when you've got a lot of nodes that you're playing with. And then we can zoom in. So if we go to this little key right here, it'll zoom into our two nodes, bring them up larger. And then we can draw a box around our nodes. And we can hit the letter S, and that will smooth them out. You see you've got some Bezier handles here. So you can actually, you can play with this, you can strengthen it. If you go a little bit below the line, you can kind of give it a weird little bump. Anyway, we'll just leave that kind of the way it was. Just get that straight there. We can make this a little more pronounced if we want, just by moving the handles. So now you'll notice that when we play this, it's going to start slow and then speed up and then slow down again at the other end. So you see how that just makes it look a little bit smoother and more organic, rather than just robotic and the same all the way through. So this is something that you'll probably use an awful lot when you get into doing more stuff in Fusion. So we'll just get rid of that for now. And there's one other concept that I want to show you for beginner stuff. And this is something that you'll also use an awful lot if you're going to design say your own titles where you want to have something revealed in a little different way. So let's say we want our text not to be there right at the beginning. So let's say we don't want it to show up until we're, say, 1.5 seconds in. So we'll go to frame 45 and we will select our merge on our text. Now we've got a couple of choices here. We can do the same thing there that we did with the logo, and we can have it show up. We've also got some other things that are built in that you can use. But the basic thing I wanted to show you here is actually we can make it appear and disappear with a mask. The way a mask works is you can use it to mask something out, or you can have it mask everything except what you want to show up. So in this case, we're going to use it to mask out the text. So we're just going to bring in a shape. So we're going to take our rectangle here and we're going to bring that in. And let's display it in our in our first window there. And you can see it's also showing an outline of it over here. So let's just get it sized appropriately. Let me see here. So let's change our height. So we're just over in the inspector panel here on the right. So we can just drop that height down. And let's change our width. We don't want it any bigger than we need it. Okay, so now you'll notice if we take this and move it off to the side, and then we connect it to the mask input on our text, now the text disappears. So if we take that position, our X position, and we move it back, you'll see it reveals our text as we move it. So now we can animate that. And we can also do it this way. And you can have it come in cornerways, which can be an interesting effect, but most people use it in one direction or another. So in this case, we're going to have it show up vertically. So we're going to go over here and we're going to set a keyframe, because this is where we want it to be fully visible. So we'll hit our keyframe, and then we're going to move this back down to frame 30, because we don't want it showing up until our graphic shows up, our logo. So now we're going to take our Y setting here, and let's have it start up here. So now if we go back to the very beginning and we play our animation here, now there was a little pause there because the computer was just having to calculate stuff out. Now that it's rendered it, if we go back to the beginning, it'll play everything smooth. So very simple, but effective. And then once again, if we go back kind of in the middle here, and we'll bring up our Spline Editor, and we'll turn off the rectangle ones. So we've just got, oh, sorry, that was the right one. Turn off this one here. All right, and we'll just zoom it in. All right, so, oh, need a bigger box. All right. And once again, we'll hit the letter S. And then we can close our Spline Editor. We'll go back to the beginning and play that again. So, pretty simple. But now you've got the basics of how to use Fusion. So if we go back to our edit node, and if you notice this red line with a little bit of blue on the end, you'll see it's turning blue. What that means is that's telling you it's rendering. So when the line's all blue, it's all rendered, and then it'll play smooth on your timeline. So we'll just go back to the beginning and we'll play it. Okay. And that's how you can make a simple title with your logo. As always, I hope you learned something today. If you think some others might find this useful, make sure you share it with them. And on your way out, take a moment and subscribe and hit that like button. So thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.